Welcome back to Great Northwest Weaponry. This is Thomas, and today we're doing something a little different. We've done a couple of these discussion videos in the past, and today we're going to be discussing a fascinating topic to me, Fudlore. And this could be a semi-controversial topic, judging by a reaction I got to a recent short, or by a couple of reactions to it anyway. We'll go over that a little bit more as we go on into the video. But first off, I also want to say we are, with this video, we are celebrating 15,000 subscribers. We just hit that number last night at both moment of recording this video and posting it, because I will probably be posting this within an hour of recording it. Just need to do the cuts and edits. Now, Fudlore is a very interesting topic to me. It is somewhat of a phenomenon where misinformation about guns has been spread and repeated for decades at this point. So first off, to define a FUD, what is a FUD? I looked into this a little bit just to kind of brush up on it, as it's a pretty well-known term, but nobody knows exactly when it started. It seems that it is a reference to Elmer Fudd from Bugs Bunny, as these typically white older gun owners are likened to Elmer Fudd in that they're generally hunters who will defend the rights to carry their own hunting rifle, but are maybe a little more willing to concede rights when it comes to anything modern. It is a kind of a generalization, but this is where we get into some of the controversy around it. I did a video talking about a bit of Fudd lore centered around the Arasaka Type 99 and Type 38. And some of the comments that I got on it surprised me. First off, to me, a surprising amount of people bought into the aforementioned Fudlore. And then I even had one guy call me out for being a racist for using the term FUD. And what other derogatory language do you use? And I was somewhat taken aback by this. I would say a little flustered. And throughout the course of this video, you may see me get a little bit worked up, because a lot of this is... again, it's misinformation. Fudlore is misinformation about guns, both old and new. We're mostly going to be looking at old ones today, and I'm just going to be going over like 3 to 5 examples of Fudlore. Most of this can be very easily debunked, is the thing. Like, for instance, the 1911 is a prime candidate for Fudlore. You hear a lot of it, and I've heard a lot of it myself. I could name a particular gun store. I'm not going to, because the owner of this store is like the crankiest individual I've ever met in my life, and I would not be surprised if he actually tried to come after me if he found out that I said something negative about him on YouTube. But the 1911 won 2 world wars. First off, it just didn't. Pistols played a very small role in either world war. The vast majority of casualties in World War I were to sickness and artillery. Small arms fire accounts for a percentage of it, but of that percentage, you can assume that the amount of casualties from pistols is just a tiny little percentage of even that. So industrial warfare, you're counting for machine guns and artillery. Into World War I, you start seeing tanks, but then World War II as well. The 1911 did not win World War II just as much as it did not win World War I. It was fielded in large numbers. The United States did issue pistols to a significant percentage of active soldiers, but the percentage of people killed in war with pistols, especially in World War I and II, versus people killed by other means is staggering. So I think that's one that we can pretty easily discount. Another one that I would say is just false to the nth degree. I've heard stories of people in the trenches with a 1911 shooting a German soldier at the lip as he jumped in, and the bullet actually throwing them back out. No, that's impossible. That is, like, very simple physics can prove this to be just silliness. Even just the claim that the 1911 was the best gun of World War II. World War I, I could see the argument. World War II, the Browning high power existed. That is partially opinion, and it depends on your opinion of 45 ACP versus 9mm, but with the Browning high power, you now have double stack magazines. less likely to jam, less moving parts. There's always a consideration for more moving parts equals more likely to have problems. The 1911 was excellent for its time. I am of the opinion that it is outdated. I still love the 1911, do not get me wrong. It is one of the most iconic American handguns of all time, by far and away. But now we're getting into a part of this where we can transition to another little bit of Fudd lore that I find fascinating / hilarious. The idea that revolvers are inherently always more reliable than semi-automatic pistols. Now this one, again, I can see where the argument started. If this started being a discussion during World War I. So both of what we've got here are World War I examples of the 1911 and the 1917, dated 1917 and 1918 respectively. The 1911, though it is a very robust, sturdy design that isn't very likely to jam, it is more likely to jam than a revolver in most circumstances. Thing is, when you hear the Fudd lore, the legends of how a revolver, it can't and won't jam, where a modern semi-automatic pistol even will. There's a thing that can happen. You see the where the barrel and the cylinder meet is not perfectly flush. If you drop a revolver in mud, stuff can get in there, and then you're gonna have some banana peel barrel syndrome happening, and it's gonna be bad. When a bullet is fired into the barrel with an obstruction, it can split your barrel. Or if it's enough of a blockage to stop the bullet from the actual projectile part of the cartridge from leaving the cylinder, you could shatter your cylinder, possibly severely damaging your hand or your face or anybody who is on either side of where the gun is firing. Revolvers are not infallible, and the thing is, if a revolver fails, it is near impossible to fix without gunsmithing tools or at least a deep knowledge of your firearm. I've known people who have blown up revolver barrels. If a semi-automatic pistol fails, typically you can clear the chamber and keep going, especially modern ones. Again, the argument when you're talking about older guns, it makes more sense, but I have heard people, again, largely at this one particular gun store, hold on to this idea that revolvers are the best self-defense weapon, for instance, because you want to make sure that it's going to be reliable and not jam. A Glock is reliable and won't jam. I don't even like Glock, and I'm defending them right now. If a revolver fails, you're hosed. Also, smaller capacity, longer time to reload. There are a lot of things that go into it, and generally speaking, FUDs that you encounter will perpetuate the myth that a revolver is the ideal self-defense weapon because it won't jam and it's plenty to put down an assailant. And generally speaking, it is. More often than not, you're only going to probably need 1, maybe 2 shots for a individual assailant if you're carrying the gun for self-defense. I would not trust my life to a revolver. I don't think you should either. There are instances where I can understand the argument to a degree, but it is not across the board revolvers are just more reliable than semi-automatic pistols. Is the 1917 revolver more reliable than a World War I Colt Model 1911? Possibly. But again, that is just a possibly type of scenario. It's pretty easy to clear a jam in a Colt. Clearing a jam in a revolver could lead to, again, banana peel of said barrel. Now I'm going to set the pistols down here, and we're going to go to the origin for why I wanted to discuss this in the first place. The Arasaka Type 99 and Type 38, this applies to both and to any other Arasaka model that has a dust cover. The Fudd lore behind this is that the dust covers were loud, and therefore Japanese soldiers would strip the dust cover off and throw it away. I will give the Fudds a bit of a pass on this. A lot of what we know about Imperial Japan and their doctrine was not known 20 years ago even. The amount of new information coming out about Imperial Japan is honestly staggering, and it's hard to keep up with all of it. But The other part of this legend is that the dust cover was so loud, in fact, that it would draw United States soldiers or British soldiers' attention to the positions of the Japanese because of how loud it is. Now, I'm going to show you something here. No rattle. At all. The other part of this, not counting the sound, is the fact that the Japanese considered these rifles to be property of the emperor. Therefore, if you take a piece of it and throw it away, you are discarding the emperor's property. What seems to have been the case with why dust covers are so often missing from Arasaka rifles of all models, and you can find evidence of this all over the place. United States soldiers, both Marines, Army, Navy, whoever got their hands on these, didn't really know how they worked, thought they were an annoyance, and tossed them into piles or threw them aside because they either, one, couldn't figure it out and didn't have the patience for it, or two, just didn't think it was necessary. I would argue that it's not really necessary. I could understand if in a different army, if they threw it away for the reasons posited by Fudds, typically. But again, people defended this when I talked about it in a short, and I was kind of surprised how many people still are of the opinion that this is a fact. You can see newsreel footage and photos of Japanese soldiers surrendering their rifles, and when they were surrendered, they still had the dust covers on them. There's this particular thing that happened with the Marines, where when they captured Japanese weapons after destroying an enemy position, they would find Japanese weapons, and rather than gathering them themselves, they would often pull the bolt out and throw it into the bushes. So if Japanese infiltrated from behind, which they did regularly, the Marines were regularly ahead of the army by enough distance that Japanese soldiers could get in between and cause trouble in the rear. This is something they were famous for. And again, this is not a theory. You can read this in Helmet for My Pillow. You can read this in With the Old Breed at Peleliu in Okinawa. Any book I've read by a Marine in World War II talks about their treatment of Japanese rifles when they found them. And typically, they would remove the bolt and throw it away. Sometimes they would even spike the rifle on a rock and break the stock. So if Japanese soldiers coming in from the rear found these rifles, they weren't usable in the condition they were found in. Then the army coming up behind would gather up what the Marines left behind, because typically once the army moved in on these island hopping campaigns, they would occupy the space. The Marines would take whatever position and then move on, and the army would come in behind and often stay. And by the time the army was there, everything from the beachhead to where the army front line now is captured territory, and you're not going to have the problems that Marines had with Japanese coming in and infiltrating. So they would gather up the weapons. Often they would find the bolts and put them back in the rifle, and the odds are a significant amount of them, either the dust cover was lost when the bolt was thrown away, or the army person in charge of getting these rifles and other Japanese equipment gathered together, whatever personnel was assigned to that task, may have just left the dust covers in a pile. There is no evidence that the Japanese themselves did this aside from legends that have been passed down from generation to generation. And understand, I am not in any way accusing our armed services of not knowing what they're talking about here, but in World War II, there were so many assumptions about what the Japanese did and why they did it that are objectively wrong, have been proven to be wrong, some within the last few years, some very shortly after World War II ended. I will grant that sometimes the things that were passed down by this generation were dead right, and sometimes they were dead wrong. Again, a lot of assumptions were made about the Japanese behavior because nobody really knew what they were up to. The culture was so vastly different from all Western cultures. Like, you look at any European nation, they did not behave the way that the Imperial Japanese Army did. And if you make assumptions about one army based on what another army did or does, you're not going to get an accurate picture of what was going on. Japanese culture was just too different from anybody else that was operating in World War II, at least in any of the Western militaries. to the degree that when you have Western militaries looking at what the Japanese are doing and trying to use their westernized minds to comprehend the reasons they're going to come up with are not going to be correct more often than not. As such, legends are born, stories are told, and you wind up with the Japanese threw away the dust cover because it was too loud. I rest my case. If you have a valid argument for why I'm wrong on any of these examples that I brought up today, I would love to hear it. Go ahead and tell me in the comments. If you're not rude about it, I will have a conversation about this, and if you have some stark evidence that I'm incorrect about any of these, I would be happy to engage in that conversation. But to me, this is just an interesting phenomenon that so much of what is known about how guns work is simply things that are being repeated by older gun owners that in many cases don't know that much about what they're talking about. And again, I'm not trying to be a disrespectful jerk about this. It's just a fact. My own father, he owned hunting rifles and he was just about scared of pistols. If you have more interesting Fudd lore that you would like to share, I may do another video like this down the road if this, gets some degree of traction at least, and I don't get yelled at too much for it. I will say, making this video, I went into it knowing it would be somewhat controversial, considering the reaction to the short that I did with the Arasaka. I am not doing it to be controversial per se. This is partially opinion, partially fact, and 100% Fudd lore, in my opinion. And Fudd lore is often incorrect from my experience. And every example that I brought up today, again, has been an example that I've actually heard being discussed, whether at a gun range or in a gun store or at a gun show or just by older gun owners generally having a discussion about hunting rifles, and you don't need more than 5 rounds ever under any circumstances. I can name a few circumstances where you might need more than 5 rounds. For instance, you have more than 3 assailants and you're panicked and you miss. People talk about if you miss, then you're just not that good of a shot. The amount of rounds spent in war versus people killed, if every bullet fired in World War II killed 1 person, there would not be people left on this planet. So consider that. Again, share any of your interesting Fudd lore that you've heard in the comments. I'd love to hear it, and I, again, may do a part 2 at some point. Thank you all again for 15,000 subscribers. This is more than I ever thought we'd reach. Thank you for watching Great Northwest Weaponry, and I will see you next time.